bring you a powerful and deeply loving story. Olivia Carter stood before the full-length mirror in her hotel room. Smoothing down the emerald green dress that hugged her figure with elegant simplicity, the silk fabric caught the warm lamplight, shimmering like water under moonlight. She had chosen this dress carefully, wanting to look confident and composed for what would likely be one of the most difficult evenings of her life. Tonight, she would attend the Ashford family gala. Tonight, she would face Derek. Her fingers trembled slightly as she fastened the delicate silver necklace her grandmother had given her years ago. The simple pendant rested just above her collarbone, small anchor of comfort in the storm of anxiety swirling through her chest. 6 months had passed since Derek had ended their engagement, and in that time, Olivia had worked hard to rebuild herself. She had taken up painting again, reconnected with old friends, and thrown herself into her work at the Children's Literacy Foundation. Yet despite all her progress, the thought of seeing Derek again made her stomach twist into knots. When the invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, her first instinct had been to throw it away. But Derek had called personally, his voice smooth and persuasive as always, insisting that they should show society they had moved on maturely. He had painted it as a gesture of goodwill, a way to put the past behind them with grace and dignity. Olivia had wanted to believe him. She had wanted to prove to herself that she was strong enough to face him without falling apart. Now, as she applied a final touch of lipstick and grabbed her clutch, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The Ashford estate was a monument to old money and inherited privilege. As Olivia's car pulled up to the circular driveway, she gazed up at the mansion with its towering columns and glowing windows. Luxury automobiles lined the drive, each one worth more than most people earned in a year. Guests in tuxedos and glittering gowns ascended the marble steps, their laughter carrying on the cool evening air. Olivia took a deep breath, paid the driver, and stepped out into the night. The moment she entered the grand ballroom, she felt the weight of curious eyes upon her. Conversations paused mid-sentence as heads turned in her direction. She could practically hear the whispers beginning. The speculation about why Derek's former fiancé had dared to show her face. The ballroom was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the polished marble floors. Tables draped in ivory linens showcased elaborate floral arrangements of white orchids and roses. A string quartet played softly in one corner, while waiters glided through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Everything spoke of wealth, taste, and power. Derek materialized from the crowd like a shark sensing blood in the water. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that emphasized his tall, athletic frame. His dark hair was swept back with precision, and his smile was as practiced as it was cold. As he approached, several people nearby turned to watch the reunion with barely concealed interest. "Olivia, how good of you to come." His voice was low enough that only she could hear the condescension dripping from each word. "I trust you'll behave yourself tonight. These people have long memories." Before Olivia could respond, he had already turned to greet someone else, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the glittering crowd. Her cheeks burned, but she forced herself to smile and make her way to the refreshment table. She could do this. She would prove she was not the broken woman everyone expected to see. The evening progressed with agonizing slowness. Olivia made polite conversation with a few acquaintances, endured pitying looks from others, tried to ignore the way people seemed to be watching her every move. Then, just as she was beginning to think she might survive the night unscathed, Derek stepped onto the small stage where the quartet had been playing. He tapped a spoon against his champagne glass. "Hot!" And the room fell silent. All eyes turned toward him as he smiled that charming smile that had once made Olivia's heart race. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight." His voice carried easily across the ballroom, confident and commanding. "I want to take a moment to talk about something personal. About growth, maturity, and the importance of learning from our mistakes." Olivia's blood ran cold. Around her, guests leaned in with interest, sensing drama. "Some of you may remember that I was engaged not long ago." Derek's eyes found Olivia in the crowd, and his smile took on a cruel edge. "I came very close to making what would have been the biggest mistake of my life. You see, I nearly married someone who simply was not suited for this world we inhabit." Nervous laughter rippled through the audience. Olivia felt her hands begin to shake. She had such dreams, such aspirations, Derek continued, his tone dripping with mockery. She thought that love and a pretty smile were enough to bridge the gap between her simple background and the responsibilities of this family. It was almost endearing, really. Like watching a child play dress-up in adult clothes. The laughter grew louder. Olivia felt her face flush hot with humiliation. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her feet seemed rooted to the spot. Around her, the faces of the guests blurred together into a sea of judgment and amusement. "I learned an important lesson from that experience," Derek said, raising his glass. "Not everyone is meant for greatness. Some people, no matter how hard they try, will always be exactly what they were born to be. Ordinary." The word hung in the air like a slap. Olivia's vision swam with unshed tears. She would not cry. She would not give them that satisfaction. But as Derek's words echoed in her mind, she felt something inside her begin to crack. It was at that moment that she noticed him. A man stood near the bar, watching the scene unfold with an expression of barely contained anger. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and striking features that spoke of mixed heritage. Unlike the other guests who seemed entertained by Derek's cruelty, this man's jaw was clenched tight, his hands gripping the edge of the bar with white-knuckled intensity. Their eyes met across the room, and Olivia saw something in his gaze that made her breath catch. Recognition, not of her specifically, but of the situation. The pain, the humiliation. He knew this feeling, she realized. He had been where she was now, before she could process what was happening. The man set down his glass and began walking toward her. His strides were purposeful and confident, cutting through the crowd like a ship through water. Conversations fell silent in his wake. Even Derek paused mid-sentence, noticing the disturbance. The man reached Olivia and stopped directly in front of her. Up close, she could see the intensity in his dark eyes, the slight furrow between his brows that suggested both concern and determination. "I apologize for interrupting," he said, his voice deep and clear enough for those nearby to hear, "but I could not stand by and watch this continue." He turned to face Derek, who stood on the stage with a confused expression that was rapidly transforming into irritation. "Speak of maturity and growth," the man continued, addressing Derek directly, "yet you demonstrate neither. What I see is a small man trying to make himself feel larger by diminishing someone else. That is not strength. That is cowardice." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. No one spoke to Derek Ashford that way. Not at his own family's gala. Not in front of everyone who mattered in their social circle. Derek's face flushed red with anger. "And who exactly are you to lecture me in my own home?" "My name is Julian Harrington." The man's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. "And I am someone who recognizes injustice when I see it." The name clearly meant something to many of the guests. Olivia heard whispers of recognition. Harrington, the entrepreneur who had built a tech empire from nothing. The man who had turned down the Ashford family's investment offers multiple times. The one person in the room whom Derek could not simply dismiss. Julian turned back to Olivia, and his expression softened. "You deserve better than this," he said quietly, meant only for her ears. "You deserve better than him." Then, before Olivia could react, before anyone could anticipate what would happen next, Julian Harrington cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Gasps and exclamations filled the air. Somewhere, someone dropped their champagne glass, the sound of shattering crystal punctuating the moment. But Olivia heard none of it. In that instant, the world narrowed to the warmth of Julian's lips against hers. The gentle but firm way he held her, the message his action conveyed to everyone watching. She mattered. She had value. She was not alone. When Julian pulled back, Olivia's heart was racing. She stared at him in shock and confusion, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Julian's eyes held hers steadily, and in them, she saw no trace of mockery or manipulation, only sincerity. "Come with me," he said softly, extending his hand. "You do not have to stay here and endure this." On the stage, Derek stood frozen, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Around them, the guests whispered frantically, their phones already emerging to capture and share this scandalous turn of events. Olivia looked at Julian's outstretched hand. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to question his motives, to protect her already battered heart. But something deeper, something that recognized genuine kindness when it appeared, urged her to take a chance. She placed her hand in his. Together, they walked through the stunned crowd toward the ballroom exit, leaving behind a room full of shocked faces and one humiliated ex-fiancé whose carefully orchestrated evening had just been turned completely upside down. Julian led Olivia through the ornate hallways of the Ashford mansion, past startled servers and wide-eyed guests who had spilled out from the ballroom to witness the spectacle. Her hand remained in his, warm and steady, as they navigated toward the grand entrance. Behind them, the sounds of frantic conversation and Derek's raised voice echoed through the corridors. But Julian never looked back, and neither did Olivia. The cool night air hit her face like a splash of cold water, jolting her back to reality. They descended the marble steps together, and only when they reached the circular driveway did Julian finally stop and release her hand. He turned to face her, his expression concerned but respectful, giving her space to process what had just happened. "I apologize if I overstepped," Julian said quietly. "That was impulsive, but I could not stand by and watch him destroy you like that." Olivia stared at him, her mind racing. 1,000 questions fought for dominance. Who was this man? Why had he intervened? What did he want from her? But the question that emerged from her lips surprised even herself. Why? Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me or what happened between Derek and me." Julian's jaw tightened, and for a moment a shadow passed across his features. "I know enough. I know what it looks like when someone uses their power to humiliate another person publicly. I know because I have been on the receiving end of that particular cruelty." Before Olivia could respond, the mansion doors burst open behind them. Derek stormed out, his face flushed with rage, followed by an elegant woman in her 60s, wearing a navy gown dripping with diamonds. Olivia recognized her immediately as Rebecca Ashford, Derek's mother, and the true power behind the family name. "This is unacceptable," Derek shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Julian. "You come into my home, assault my guest, and think you can just walk away?" Julian turned slowly, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "I assaulted no one. I kissed a woman who did not object. If that offends you, perhaps you should examine why." Rebecca Ashford glided forward, her expression calculating. "Mr. Harrington, is it? I have heard of you. The self-made man who rejected our investment opportunities." Her smile was thin and cold. "How very noble of you to defend this girl. But surely you realize what this looks like. A publicity stunt? An attempt to embarrass my family?" "With respect, Mrs. Ashford," Julian replied evenly, "your family needs no help from me in that regard. Your son managed that quite effectively on his own." Derek lunged forward, but his mother caught his arm with surprising strength. "Control yourself," she hissed. Then, turning back to Julian and Olivia, she continued in a voice like honey laced with poison. "Miss Carter, I always knew you were a social climber, but this is truly impressive. First my son, now Mr. Harrington. Tell me, what is your secret?" The words struck Olivia like physical blows. She had spent the entire evening trying to maintain her composure, trying to prove she was strong enough to face them all. But Rebecca's accusation, delivered with such casual cruelty, threatened to shatter what remained of her defenses. "That is enough." Julian's voice cut through the night like a blade. He moved to stand beside Olivia, not in front of her but next to her, a subtle but powerful statement of solidarity. "You speak of social climbing, Mrs. Ashford, but what I witnessed tonight was far worse. I saw a man so insecure in his own worth that he needed to tear down someone who once cared for him. I saw a room full of people who chose entertainment over decency. And now I see a mother who taught her son that cruelty is acceptable as long as you have money and status." Rebecca's eyes flashed with anger, but before she could respond, another figure emerged from the mansion. A man in his 40s with kind eyes and a weathered face approached the group, his expression grave. "Julian, there you are," the the man said, nodding politely to the Ashfords. I apologize for the commotion. We should be going. Thomas Julian acknowledged him with relief. Perfect timing as always. Thomas Chen, Julian's business partner and closest friend, took in the scene with a quick, assessing glance. He had spent enough years in business to recognize a powder keg when he saw one. The car is ready whenever you are. Derek, who had been temporarily silenced by Julian's words, found his voice again. This is not over, Harrington. You have no idea who you are dealing with. My family has connections that could destroy your little tech company in a week.
Ow.
Julian smiled, but there was no humor in it. Please, try. I welcome the challenge. But let me give you some advice, Derek. Threats only work when the person you are threatening has something to fear. I built my company from nothing. I have faced bankruptcy, betrayal, and failures that would have broken lesser men. Your family's connections do not frighten me in the slightest. He turned to Olivia and offered his hand once more. Come, you deserve better than this circus. Olivia hesitated for only a moment before taking his hand again. As they walked toward the waiting car, she heard Rebecca calling after them, her voice sharp with frustration. But the words no longer carried the same weight. Somehow, in the span of one incredible evening, Olivia had gone from being the object of ridicule to being defended by someone who asked nothing in return. Thomas held the car door open, and Julian gestured for Olivia to enter first. Once they were all inside and the driver had pulled away from the Ashford estate, silence filled the vehicle. Olivia sat by the window, watching the lights of the mansion disappear behind them, her mind struggling to make sense of everything that had happened. Where would you like us to take you? Thomas asked gently from the front seat. Olivia opened her mouth to give her hotel address, but Julian spoke first. Actually, if you do not mind, I would like to talk. Somewhere quiet, somewhere we can both breathe. He looked at Olivia. There is a coffee shop not far from here that stays open late. Would you be willing to join me? I promise I will explain everything. And if at any point you want to leave, Thomas will drive you wherever you need to go. No questions asked. Olivia studied Julian's face in the dim light of the car. She saw sincerity there, but also something else, pain. The same kind of pain she carried in her own heart. Against her better judgment, she found herself nodding, 20 minutes later. They sat across from each other in a small, warmly lit coffee shop tucked away on a quiet street. The place was nearly empty at this late hour, with only a tired barista cleaning behind the counter and one other customer absorbed in their laptop. Thomas had elected to wait in the car, giving them privacy. Julian wrapped his hands around a mug of black coffee, and Olivia cradled a cup of chamomile tea, letting the warmth seep into her cold fingers. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable, but it was heavy with unasked questions. I was engaged once, Julian finally said, his eyes fixed on his coffee. 3 years ago? Her name was Catherine. We met at a charity function, and I thought I had found someone who saw me for who I was. Not what I had built or how much money I made. Olivia listened without interrupting. Sensing that this was a story Julian did not tell often, we dated for 2 years before I proposed. Everything seemed perfect. She was brilliant, charming, and she seemed to love the quiet life I preferred away from the spotlight. Julian's jaw tightened. The wedding was planned for a summer evening at a vineyard. 500 guests. I wanted something smaller, but Catherine insisted it was important to her family. He paused, taking a sip of his coffee before continuing. 2 weeks before the wedding, I overheard her on the phone. She was laughing, talking to someone about how easy it had been to fool me. How I was so desperate to be loved that I could not see what was right in front of my face. She had been having an affair with someone else for over a year. The wedding was never about love. It was about securing her future financially while maintaining her relationship with her actual lover. Olivia felt her chest tighten with sympathy. That's horrible. I'm so sorry. The worst part was not the betrayal itself, Julian said quietly. It was what happened after. When I confronted her, she did not apologize or show any remorse. Instead, she told everyone I had called off the wedding because I was cold and controlling. She painted herself as the victim and me as the villain. Many people believed her because she was charming and I was just the quiet tech entrepreneur who kept to himself. Ow! How did you survive it? Olivia asked softly. Julian met her eyes. I almost did not. I fell into a dark place for months. Questioned everything about myself. Wondered if maybe she was right, if maybe there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unlovable. He set down his mug. But eventually, with Thomas's help and a lot of therapy, I realized that her cruelty said nothing about my worth. It only revealed her character. 8. Is that why you helped me tonight? Olivia asked. Because you saw yourself in my situation? Partly, Julian admitted. But also because what Derek did was wrong, and someone needed to say so. You stood there taking every cruel word with such dignity. You refused to let him see you break, even though I could tell how much it was hurting you. That takes tremendous strength. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes, the first she had allowed herself to shed all evening. I do not feel strong. I feel like a fool. I thought Derek genuinely wanted to make peace tonight. I thought attending his gala would prove I had moved on. Instead, I gave him the perfect opportunity to humiliate me in front of everyone who matters in his world. Their world, Julian corrected gently. Not yours. You do not belong to that world, Olivia. You are better than it. You say that, but you do not know me, Olivia said, wiping at her eyes. I could be exactly what Derek said I am. Ordinary, simple, not good enough. Julian leaned forward, his expression intense. Let me tell you what I saw tonight. I saw a woman who walked into a hostile environment with her head held high. I saw someone who chose grace over retaliation, even when given every reason to lash out. I saw strength and dignity that most people in that ballroom will never possess, no matter how much money or status they accumulate. He paused. You are not ordinary, Olivia. You are extraordinary. And if Derek was too blind to see that, then he lost something precious. The words settled over Olivia like a warm blanket. She wanted to believe him, but 3 years with Derek had left scars that went deeper than she cared to admit. Why are you being so kind to me? You kissed me in front of hundreds of people. You defended me against one of the most powerful families in the city. You do not even know me. Perhaps that is exactly why, Julian said with a slight smile. I have no history with you, no preconceived notions or expectations. I can only see you as you are right now in this moment. And what I see is someone worth defending. Olivia felt something shift inside her chest. Not love or infatuation, but something simpler and perhaps more valuable. Hope. The tiniest spark of belief that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in the world was like Derek. That kindness without ulterior, motives could still exist. They talked for another hour. The conversation flowing more easily as they shared pieces of their lives. Olivia told Julian about her work with the Children's Literacy Foundation, about her passion for painting, about the small apartment she had moved into after leaving Derek's world behind. Julian shared stories about building his company from nothing, about the failures that had taught him more than any success, about his love for astronomy and how looking at the stars reminded him how small their problems were in the grand scheme of things. When Thomas finally knocked gently on the coffee shop window, indicating it was well past midnight, Olivia was surprised by how disappointed she felt that the evening had to end. Julian walked her to the car and gave the driver her hotel address. Before she could climb in, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a simple business card. This has my personal number on it, he said, handing it to her. I want you to know that tonight was not some grand gesture I will forget about tomorrow. If you need anything at all, please call me, even if it is just to talk. Olivia took the card, her fingers brushing against his. Thank you, Julian, for everything. I still do not fully understand why you did what you did, but I am grateful. You do not need to understand it, Julian said with a warm smile. Just promise me you will stop letting Derek Ashford define your worth. Promise me you will remember what I told you tonight. I promise to try, Olivia said honestly, as the car pulled away. Olivia looked back to see Julian standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. In that moment, she felt something she had not experienced in a very long time. Safety. Not because Julian had swept in like some fairy tale prince to rescue her, but because he had stood beside her and reminded her of her own strength. The card he had given her sat in her palm, warm from his touch. Olivia studied it in the dim light of the car. Beneath his name and number, there was a small quote printed in elegant script: "Stars cannot shine without darkness." She smiled, tucking the card carefully into her clutch. And for the first time since her engagement to Derek had ended, Olivia Carter felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to be okay. 3 months had passed since the night of the Ashford Gala, and the autumn leaves were beginning to paint the city in shades of gold and crimson. Olivia stood in her small studio apartment, adding the final touches to a canvas that had consumed her for the past 2 weeks. The painting depicted a night sky filled with stars, each one burning bright against the surrounding darkness. It was her best work yet, and she knew exactly why. Her phone buzzed on the nearby table. She set down her brush and picked it up, smile already forming on her lips before she even read the message. "Julian, still on for dinner tonight? I found a new place that I think you will love. They have an entire wall dedicated to local artists. I may have mentioned your name to the owner." Olivia laughed, her fingers flying across the screen as she replied. "Olivia, you are incorrigible. Yes, still on for dinner. Pick me up at 7. Julian, I will be there at 6:50. I have yet to master the art of being fashionably late. The relationship between Olivia and Julian had developed slowly and naturally over the past months. After that first night, Julian had kept his promise. He had called a few days later, not with expectations or demands, but simply to check how she was doing. They had met for coffee again, then lunch, then a walk through the botanical gardens. Each meeting had been easy and comfortable. Free from the pressure Olivia had felt during her time with Derek, Julian never pushed. He never demanded more than she was ready to give. When Olivia had nightmares about the gala and called him at 2 in the morning, he had answered on the second ring and talked with her until dawn. When she had doubted whether to submit her paintings to a local gallery, he had encouraged her, but respected her ultimate decision. When she needed space to process her lingering feelings about Derek, Julian had given it without complaint or guilt trips. Slowly, carefully, Olivia had begun to trust again. And with that trust came something she had not expected. Love. Real love. The kind built on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. A knock at her door pulled Olivia from her thoughts. She glanced at the clock. It was only 4 in the afternoon. Julian was not due for another 3 hours, and she was not expecting anyone else. When she opened the door, she found her best friend Nina Rodriguez standing in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing an enormous grin. "Emergency best friend meeting," Nina announced, pushing past Olivia into the apartment. "We need to talk about Julian." Olivia closed the door, accepting one of the coffee cups. "What about Julian?" Nina set down her bag and turned to face Olivia with sparkling eyes. "Oh, come on. You two have been dancing around each other for months. The man looks at you like you hung the moon, and you light up whenever his name is mentioned. When are you going to admit that this is serious?" Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It is serious. We both know that. Then why have not you told him you love him?" Nina pressed. "Because you do love him, right? This is not just rebound stuff?" Olivia moved to the window, looking out at the city below. "I do love him. More than I thought possible. But I am terrified, Nina. What if I am wrong again? What if I am seeing what I want to see instead of what is really there?" Nina joined her at the window, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Olivia, I have known you since college. I saw you with Derek, and I see you with Julian. These are not the same thing. Not even close." "How can you be so sure?" Olivia asked quietly. "Because Derek made you smaller," Nina said simply. "He criticized your paintings, your work, your friends. He wanted you to fit into his world by cutting away pieces of yourself until you matched his ideal. Julian does the opposite. He celebrates everything about you. He wants you to grow, to take up more space, to shine brighter. That is not manipulation. That is love." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. Deep down, she knew Nina was right. The difference between Derek and Julian was night and day. But the scars from her past made it hard to fully trust her own judgment. "There is something else you should know," Nina said carefully. "Derek is in trouble. Real trouble. Some of his business dealings are being investigated. People are talking, and the Ashford reputation is taking a serious hit. His mother is trying to do damage control, but it is not working. Olivia turned to look at her friend. How do you know this? I work in finance, remember? Nina said with a slight smile. Word gets around. Apparently, several investors pulled out after what happened at the gala. People started looking more closely at Derek's business practices, and they did not like what they found. Shady contracts, broken promises, things that were technically legal, but morally questionable. The golden boy image is crumbling. Olivia should have felt vindicated, but instead she just felt sad. I do not take pleasure in his downfall. I just wanted to move on with my life. I know, Nina said gently. That is what makes you a better person than he ever was. But Olivia, you need to understand something. By standing up to him, by refusing to let him reduce you to nothing, you set off a chain reaction. Other people found the courage to speak up about their experiences with Derek and his family. You did not destroy him. He destroyed himself. You just refused to go down with him. The words settled over Olivia like a revelation. She had spent so long thinking of herself as Derek's victim that she had not recognized her own power, by simply refusing to accept his cruelty as deserved. By walking out of that gala with her head held high, she had reclaimed her narrative, now Nina said, setting down her coffee cup and grabbing Olivia by the shoulders. You are going to get ready for your date with Julian. You are going to wear that beautiful burgundy dress you bought last week, and you are going to tell that man how you feel, because life is too short to waste time being afraid of happiness. That evening when Julian arrived at exactly 6:55, Olivia answered the door wearing the burgundy dress and a nervous smile. Julian's expression when he saw her made her heart skip a beat. There was no calculation in his eyes, no assessment of whether she met some arbitrary standard, just pure appreciation and affection. You look absolutely stunning, he said softly. Offering his arm, they drove to a cozy restaurant in the Arts District. The kind of place with exposed brick walls, soft lighting, and an atmosphere that invited conversation. True to his word, Julian had arranged for several of Olivia's paintings to be displayed on one of the walls. Seeing her work hanging in a real restaurant, not just hidden away in her studio, filled Olivia with a sense of pride she had not expected. Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing. Julian told her about a new project his company was developing, a program to provide free technology education to underprivileged communities. Olivia shared her plans to expand the Literacy Foundation's reach to more schools. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and comfortable silences. As dessert arrived, Julian reached across the table and took Olivia's hand. His expression turned serious, and Olivia felt her heart begin to race. Olivia, there is something I need to tell you, Julian began. These past 3 months have been the best of my life. Not because of any grand adventures or exciting events, but simply because I got to spend them getting to know you. Every conversation, every laugh, every moment of silence we have shared has been precious to me.
Olivia
Squeezed his hand, emotion tightening her throat. After Catherine? I thought I would never be able to trust anyone again, Julian continued. I thought love was just a pretty lie people told themselves, but you changed that. Not by being perfect, but by being real. By letting me see your fears and doubts, your strength and vulnerability. You taught me that love is not about finding someone without scars. It is about finding someone whose scars fit with yours. Tears slid down Olivia's cheeks. Julian, I love you. I have loved you for weeks now, but I was too afraid to say it. Too afraid that I was making another mistake. Julian stood and moved to kneel beside her chair. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. I am not asking you to marry me tonight, Julian said quickly, seeing the flash of panic in her eyes. I know we both need more time to heal, to build something truly solid. But I want you to know my intentions. I want you to know that I am serious about us, about our future together. He opened the box to reveal a delicate ring with a single-star sapphire set in silver. The stone caught the light, deep blue with a white star pattern in its center. This is a promise ring, Julian explained. A promise that I will wait as long as you need. A promise that I will never rush you or pressure you. And a promise that when you are ready, when we are both ready, I will ask you properly to spend your life with me. Because Olivia Carter, you are the brightest star in my darkness, and I do not want to spend another day without you in my life. Olivia could not speak through her tears. She simply nodded, extending her hand so Julian could slip the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the star sapphire glowing against her skin. Julian stood and pulled her into his arms. And Olivia felt something inside her finally heal. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Safe, supportive, real. "Thank you for taking a chance on me," Julian whispered against her hair. "Thank you for letting me prove that not all men are like Derek. Thank you for showing me that I was worthy of being defended." Olivia whispered back, "Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible." They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, while the restaurant staff pretended not to notice and other diners smiled at the romantic scene. When they finally pulled apart, Julian cupped Olivia's face gently in his hands, mirroring the gesture from that first night at the gala. But this time, when he kissed her, it was not an act of defiance or protection. It was a promise. A beginning. 6 months later, Olivia stood in a small art gallery, surrounded by her paintings. The opening night of her first solo exhibition had drawn a surprising crowd, including several local critics and art collectors. She wore a simple black dress and the star sapphire ring that never left her finger. Julian stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, providing silent support. When a particularly intimidating critic approached to discuss her work, he squeezed her hand once and then stepped back, letting her shine on her own. Across the room, Olivia caught sight of a familiar face. Nina was there, of course, along with several other friends from the Literacy Foundation. But there was one face she had not expected to see. Derek Ashford stood near the entrance, looking diminished somehow. His expensive suit could not hide the shadows under his eyes or the slump of his shoulders. He made no move to approach, just watched from a distance with an expression that might have been regret. Olivia felt Julian tense beside her. "Do you want me to have him removed?" he asked quietly. Olivia studied her ex-fiancé for a moment. The man who had once held so much power over her now seemed small and sad. She felt no anger toward him, no desire for revenge, just a detached sort of pity. "No," she said softly. "Let him stay. Let him see what I became without him." Julian smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "You are remarkable. Do you know that?" "I am learning," Olivia replied, turning her attention back to the critic, who was asking about her inspiration for the star paintings. Derek stayed for perhaps 20 minutes, then slipped out without a word. Olivia barely noticed his departure. She was too busy living her life, celebrating her success, and planning a future. With a man who valued her for exactly who she was, as the evening wound down and the last guests trickled out, Julian wrapped his arms around Olivia from behind. Resting his chin on her shoulder, ready to go home, he asked. Olivia leaned back against him, looking at her paintings one last time. Each canvas told a story of darkness and light, of pain and healing, of falling and rising again. "Yes," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "I am ready." They walked out of the gallery hand in hand into a future neither of them could have predicted that night at the Ashford Gala. But it was a future they would build together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. Derek Ashford had meant to humiliate Olivia that night, to reduce her to nothing in front of everyone who mattered. Instead, he had inadvertently given her the greatest gift possible. He had pushed her into the arms of someone who truly deserved her, and in doing so, had set her free. The stars cannot shine without darkness, Olivia thought, remembering the quote on Julian's business card. And sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest new beginnings. As they drove through the city, Olivia looked down at her star sapphire ring, then up at Julian's profile as he navigated the streets. In 6 months, he would propose properly, on a hilltop under a sky full of stars. She would say yes without hesitation. They would build a life together, filled with art and technology, literacy programs and astronomical observations, coffee shop conversations and quiet evenings at home. But that night, driving through the city with her hand in his, Olivia Carter was simply happy. Happy to have survived the darkness, happy to have found the light, and most of all, happy to have learned that her worth was never dependent on Derek's opinion or anyone else's approval. She was enough, exactly as she was, and she always had been. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like. Share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more and meaningful stories.